So let's get started talking about conflict. And I know you may or may not have saw a post on my other social media accounts, but we're going to kind of start from the beginning and just kind of go over what we're trying to do here. You know, we are going to use some faith-based principles in order to direct how we control our life when it comes to conflict. And that is going to be a different approach than what you may be used to. And I just want to tell you up front that it does not make you weak. It does not make you soft. It does not make you anything. In fact, what it does is shift the power back to within your control. And the only person that you will ever be able to control is yourself. And so we're going to give us tools that we need in order to be able to address a situation head on and address it in the way that the Bible tells us to. And this is tough to hear, but the Bible tells us the second greatest commandment outside of loving God is to love your neighbor. And so if that's true, he even says to love our enemies. If that's true, then how we have to treat them during conflict is with love and servitude. And so we have to really take a minute to pause and think about our own process in this and how we are reacting to the situation or entering into the conversation and what ownership we play. Because I can tell you pretty much every time, depending on the scenario, we do have a part in whatever happened, whether that's a miscommunication, the way that we intentionally communicated and intentionally trying to hurt someone. Maybe it was something that we unintentionally did and we didn't even recognize the downstream effects of that. And so there's usually, if we're involved in it and there's a conflict in it, we do have some role that we play in that. And so that's really where we're going to start, is trying to just understand the whole situation and not go in there jumping to conclusions. And we're going to focus on how we can avoid things like what I'm going to call the blame game of whose fault is it? Because it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's about correction and expectation moving forward. And that is both true in your professional life and your personal life. Nowhere in this blame game is anybody going to win, right? It is just a way to keep you distracted and to keep you fighting. The next thing that we're going to avoid is what I'm going to call the victim ick. We are not victims in any scenario. We are never going to be the victim. We are going to be the victor in all scenarios, and we are going to kind of take back the power of conversation and the power of control, knowing that we don't ever own the other person's emotions. We don't ever own what they are or they aren't going to say, and we're not even going to own the level of maturity, emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it, that they are at while we are growing, right? But we are going to love them, because that is what the Bible says. We are going to love them, and we are going to respect the fact that maybe they're growing at a slower rate than we are. The last thing that we're going to try to avoid is our passive aggressive behaviors. And we're going to talk some more about all three of these things in order to, kind of educate ourselves on how to handle difficult conversations and what the real intent is going to be. So we're going to start with the same example that we use on the other social media accounts of your significant other needing to do the dishes and not ever doing the dishes. And maybe this is a repeated pattern, so I'm gonna have some built up angst about the situation. I'm going to be really upset, and my first initial reaction is going to be pure hurt. You never do what you say you're going to do. I don't understand why it's so hard for you to do the dishes. Why does this keep happening to me, right? So that's the victim mentality. The blame is what they do or what they don't do. This is your fault, that kind of thing. And of course, the passive behavior, the passive aggressive behavior is going to be what is it going to take for you to be able to just do what you need to do? I'm tired of doing everything, that kind of thing, right? And so nobody really wins in these situations. And I think that sometimes we get so caught up in our feelings, and I'm not saying your feelings aren't real, and I'm not saying your feelings aren't valid, because I can tell you right now, I've been pretty upset plenty of times. So all of those things are true, but the goal, and sometimes I think we lose sight of the goal because we shift the goal to hurting them as much as we're hurting ourselves. But the goal is really to get it all fixed, right? The goal is to not have those types of issues anymore, whether it's somebody not holding up their end of the bargain or whether it's really just something that we want to plan and move forward and move going forward. And it's not, even though the Bible talks about forgiveness and it says you forgive a lot, 70 times 7, right? We are constantly forgiving, and we need to remember that, because that's going to be important, especially as we grow ourselves. We're going to find ourselves responding better, bringing better conversation to the table. And that person isn't necessarily watching. They're not keeping up with what we're doing to make ourselves better. And so we're going to have to be forgiving and the teacher in the situation of how to have better conversation together. And we can't just expect them to be at our level because we decided today that we were going to watch a video and learn how to do it. And so we have to make sure that we're super honest with ourselves and aware of the situation, and self-aware, while also being aware of how the other person might feel. So we are going to boost our emotional intelligence levels up, and we're going to talk about why we're going to do it and how we're going to do it, okay? So now my husband doesn't do the dishes. It's a recurring event, and I've had it up to here. I'm about to go have that difficult conversation, and I'm going to avoid the why do you never do this? Why? And so I'm going to say, hey, tell me the dishes aren't done. Can you tell me what happened? Okay. And did you notice my tone? Did you notice the way that I asked the question? Okay. Only like 7% of what the word choice that you use is what people hear. 7%. The other 93% is your body language and your tone. So you've got to fix that when you're coming to the conversation. If there was ever a poker face, now is the time to learn your poker face. And if you don't have one, you're going to have to start working on one. There's never going to be another option. Okay. And so because 93% of what you say has nothing to do with the word choice that you used. Okay. So I could go in there and I could say, why didn't you do the dishes? And it could be a little bit different than why didn't you do the dishes? Okay. So I want you to think about, even if I fix some of the words that you say, if you cannot fix your tone and your body language, it's not going to work. Right. So I'm going to go in there. We're not blaming anybody. So I'm not blaming him. I haven't set up the blame to be, it's his fault that the dishes aren't done. I'm going to ask, hey, tell me about why the dishes aren't done. What happened? And I'm going to allow him to tell me whatever it is that he's going to tell me. Okay. And then I'm going to say something along the lines of, okay, well, hey, it's really hard for me when I come home from work and the dishes aren't done, and I'm counting on you to do it, because then it feels like I have to do more. So what can we do? Like, how can I help so that we can get these dishes done on time? When you say you're going to do them. And, I'm not saying that he's going to have the best attitude for that, because for the last 30,000 times that I've had the dishes conversation with him, because remember, this isn't the first time, he's going to feel personally attacked, and he's going to feel that way because history repeats itself, right? So for the longest time, I have attacked him, okay? And so he's not going to understand that today I'm really not attacking him. So I'm going to be forgiving, and I'm going to start changing the way that I talk to him repeatedly, so that then the pattern of the way that he feels about our conversations is going to change. I'm not going to expect him to just know that I'm going to be nicer now. So this is really important, because you're going to feel defeated the first couple of times that you go in with this type of style, and the person doesn't necessarily respect it, especially in your personal life, not so much your professional life, because they're going to expect some level of professionalism from you, but your personal life, they're not going to expect anything from you. Okay. They're not going to expect that now you're nice. Okay. And that now you don't mean it in the way that you were. And maybe that yesterday, not to use language, but yesterday you were a bitch and today you're trying to be nice. Okay. They're not going to make that adjustment, and they're not expected to. We're not going to expect that. We're going to expect people around us to slowly transition to this new way of us approaching the situation. Okay. And you might think, oh, okay, they're going to think that I'm weak. They're going to think that I'm not standing up for myself or whatever. We're protecting our peace. Okay. We are protecting what is ours. We are bringing back the power to ourselves. We are in control of what we say. We are in control of how we feel. We are in control of the things that are happening in between this dynamic. We're choosing when we want to be in it and when we want to step out of it. We're choosing the emotion that we want to bring into it with the intent and the expectation. We are choosing all of it. Okay. Can I be that other person? Absolutely. But that's not who I want to be anymore. Okay. I want to stop living in this ugly back and forth. Okay. I want to move forward to a place where we can have a better conversation and less ugliness and darkness in the way that I operate from a day to day to day. Okay. I don't want to come home every day after work and the dish is not done and be argumentative. I do not want to have one more argument. I do not want to go to work and sit down with an employee and sit there and berate them when they have their same home life situation with whatever's going on with them, or the fact that they may have felt like they did everything right and they just didn't recognize what they did wrong. I don't want to bring them into the room and make them feel even worse than what they did. Now, I'll never be able to control the situation, so they might still feel bad, and that's okay, okay? If I didn't feel bad about the way that I spoke to my husband, I wouldn't have made the changes that I did, right? I wouldn't have tried to have a different type of conversation. So feeling bad is okay. It is probably the trigger that makes people start to make the changes. So you're going to allow them to feel their emotions, and we're going to take back control and power over the conversation, okay? No more blame game, no more victim ick, no more passive aggression. Okay. And so we're gonna start with not asking those types of questions. We're not going to go in with why. Why do we not want to say why? Because why, it, generally speaking, it usually assigns blame. Okay. And whether the blame is, that victim mentality of why me, or that blame of why did you, okay, or why can't you, or when will you, all of those are blame words, okay? And it's not even necessarily that blame has to be somebody else, right? So like, it could be like just an overall, like, when is this going to happen? When are we going to get it together, right? So we're not blaming any one person. It may even be a group blame, but it's not an active statement. It's not a moving forward towards resolution statement. So we're going to avoid that as well. We're not going to say that. We're not going to do the types of things that don't help us towards that resolution and that peace that we're seeking. And so we're going to take a minute to talk about why this is. Where is this coming from? Like, what biblical principles is this? How are we going to say that this is really true? Well, we see this in the way that Jesus is. Number one, when he comes back, when he comes and he starts his ministry, a lot of times when he's talking to somebody, he just genuinely asks questions. In John 8, he sees the woman that the town had caught committing adultery. And so I told you that we were going to look at what part we play in it. So the first thing, they catch her, right? So they know it's not a secret. Like, she did it, okay? And the town wants to stone her to death. And they're like, hey, let's throw stones at her. She committed adultery. We need to do this. And Jesus says to them, well, may the first one who's never sinned throw a stone at her. Okay? Meaning, if we take a look at what all you've done and what part you play in this game, should you be the person throwing the stone? And of course, nobody stones her because nobody's sin free, right? So they all just kind of take a step back. And he goes to the woman and he says, did you get any stones? And she said, no. And he said, then you won't receive a stone from me either. And so he forgives her for her sin. But the first thing that he does is ask her a question, right? And I mean, you see this all over the New Testament. He asks them, why, God feeds the birds. He makes everything grow. Why would you be concerned, or why are you worried over your own stuff? He asks, why are you anxious at this point? He does ask why, but he's specifically helping you identify something after he gives this long explanation of, we do this, God does this, God does this, God does this. And then, so why are you worried? So it's like a follow-up statement, right? But we see this whenever he's dealing with the Pharisees. I mean, there's lots of times where he starts to ask, kind of a why type of question. Even when Peter says, when he's talking to Peter and Peter's going to deny him, he doesn't come at him with like pure anger. And that's really what we want to do in any situation, is help them come to the realization that A, it might be hurting you, A, it may not be the right, B, it might not be the right thing, C, we need to think of something new. Whatever the intent is, we kind of want that other person to come to their own conclusion by asking the right questions, okay? So now I'm going to take it to a work scenario. I like to use the example of watching somebody have an inappropriate conversation with somebody else. So let's just say that your coworkers are fighting and you see it, and so two of them together, and you're a third party in this. It's not necessarily even you. Maybe you're a supervisor. Maybe you're not even the lead. Maybe it's that type of scenario. But you watch it and you don't think it's right. Okay, so that's hard, right? To go in there and be like, you were wrong, you shouldn't have done what you did, and she was wrong too, but you were more wrong, right? Like, if somebody came and told me you were more wrong, I would have been like, you weren't there, you didn't hear everything, all of those kinds of things, right? And so a different way to approach the situation is to pick the one that you feel like was in the wrong the most, if not both. I mean, it doesn't matter. In this scenario, we're going to say it's one. Maybe one girl went off on the other girl. And you could just say, hey, can you tell me about what just happened? And you're going to let her throw all of it out, and she's going to say all of those things. And you might ask the question of, well, do you think that was the best way to do that? And the person may say, yeah, because she did this and all of that. She went off on me first. She shouldn't have said that. She did that in front of somebody, or whatever she's going to say, right? And you could circle it back and say, if the shoe, if the shoe was on the other foot, would you want somebody to, would you want me to do that to you? Or you might just say, hey, I'm not sure that really was the best thing. Maybe you should think about it and we can talk about it more later, and you can walk away from the conversation so that person can kind of come, maybe it takes them some time to think, right? Maybe it's not the best thing. Or, I might have asked, do you think that she heard what you were trying to say to her in the way that you said it? I mean, do you think that you got your point across? And the answer is probably no, because if you're screaming at me, I'm not listening to what you're saying. I'm more mad that you're treating me that way than anything about what you're saying. I cannot process what you are trying to tell me because I am too mad about what you're doing to me right now. And so this is why I'm saying that it's important for us not to be so caught up in everything that we forget what we're actually doing, what the goal of the conversation is. And so this is why this is so important. And we see, again, we see this in the Bible with this concept of love your neighbor, love your enemies, okay? Love, serve them. And so the idea is that how can I, because that is what servitude is. How can I help you in this type of situation? And when people see that, again, this is where I say that people like to say it makes them soft or weak or any of those kinds of things. It truly doesn't, okay? I can choose not to do it just as much as I can choose to do it. I can choose to just stay quiet and let those two girls fight just as much as I can go have that conversation. But what am I doing? I'm taking control back of my workplace. Do you know how ridiculous it is to work with people who just sit there and constantly bicker back and forth? Do you know how ridiculous it is to work with somebody who I can go to one person and then I say, hey, can you tell so-and-so? And they're like, no, girl, I'm not talking to her. And you're like, okay, and you have to go do whatever it is you're going to do. None of that is worth it, right? I'm protecting my peace, okay? I mean, I'm glad that it gets more peaceful between them after I address it, hopefully, right? But I'm more concerned about, what are we going to do to make this right, and what are we going to do so that this gets better going forward? Again, that protection of that peace. And so this is really when somebody else is wrong, and this is not necessarily this is when you kind of know that they're wrong. So you witnessed it, you know that your husband didn't do the dishes, you know that the other person is quote unquote in the wrong. We will talk some more about how to do it when maybe possibly you're wrong. We're going to talk about situations where nobody's right or wrong and we need to move it forward and there's just not an agreement on how to move it forward. We're going to talk some more about some other ways, but this is the one where you know that the other person is wrong and you want to help them come to the realization that they are wrong. And we're going to start again, just to close it out. No more whys, no more wins, no more how can you do this? No more blame game, no more victim ick, no more passive aggression, right? We're going to find the part that we play in this situation, and we're going to offer our servitude towards them in love. And that's how we're going to help get them to where they need to be.